Hi guys, welcome back to Sipping with M&T. I'm Maria. So I am doing another solo video today. The subject is going to be about breastfeeding. And this will not be your typical breastfeeding video. This is not going to be, a breast is best video. Yes, I'm still breastfeeding my 2.5-year-old man-child. Trust me, I get plenty of opinions about it. So I originally was going to do a video basically doing breastfeeding tips or advice, for beginners or extended breastfeeding, but there's already a lot of information about breastfeeding and like pro breastfeeding, and I wanted to do something a little bit different and maybe talk about things that not a lot of people talk about, and we should. So personally, I love breastfeeding. I mean, it's definitely not easy. And I definitely try to support the moms who, or give advice for the ones who do decide to breastfeed. But, I also am very supportive of the moms who decide not to breastfeed, because I know firsthand just how difficult it is and how difficult it can get. I'm in the process of weaning him. He's almost fully weaned. Thank God. But I do still follow breastfeeding forums, and the thing that drives me crazy is seeing all these, breastfeeding moms that just bash the women who don't breastfeed, or who choose to formula feed, or whatever the case, and whatever the reason. And it's ridiculous. And you know what, I did a little bit of both, especially in the beginning. Personally, I didn't feel comfortable breastfeeding in public. That's just me. I don't see anything wrong with it personally, but for me, I did not feel comfortable. So I always had formula on hand, and it didn't decrease my supply. There are so many breastfeeding moms that are just so judgy, and it drives me, judgy people just drive me crazy in general. Typically, I don't really care what people have to say, when it comes towards me, or they're judgy towards me. I don't care. Trust me, I've been breastfeeding for 2.5 years. I've heard all kinds of things. I don't care. But when other women who have had a difficult time breastfeeding, or have had issues with it, or just don't have the right information, and then they're being judged for it, it drives me crazy, and it's not okay. And there are a few conditions that really do that, where women really have to stop breastfeeding or are unable to continue breastfeeding because they don't have a big supply. And I feel that's one of the things that there's not enough information on, or definitely a lot of misinformation on, because I know a lot of hospitals try to, trying to make it seem like, oh, you're not doing this, or you're not doing enough. There's always this feeling of you're not doing enough, especially as mothers, and we really just need to throw that out. I did have a hard time breastfeeding. It took some time to adapt. I didn't necessarily have trouble with milk flow. I just really had a hard time with breastfeeding itself. My son, he was a very aggressive eater. Took me about 2 months to really get the hang of it, and I was literally on the verge of giving up. I was in so much pain. I was so tired, and I had the milk. It's just my son, we just were trying to both get in the groove of it. And that's, I think, one of the biggest misinformations, is just because it's natural, it doesn't always come natural. And my son was hungry. Like, he wanted to eat. He didn't want to wait. He wanted to eat right now. We would literally fight each other for a good 5 to 10 minutes trying to latch for 2 months. I mean, I had Kaiser as my healthcare provider, and they're very pro breastfeeding, and they gave me pamphlets and all these resources, and I took a class, and I learned more on the internet and talking to other moms who breastfed than I did from my actual hospital. And they made it seem like, if you do this, this, and this, then it'll work. And you know what? It didn't really. A lot of the misinformation that goes around, that maybe most healthcare providers don't advise you, that it's not going to just happen right off the bat. A lot of times, both you and baby have to adapt. And then if you have issues with your supply to begin with, it can be so difficult. And even for a lot of women, from what I've read, as far as other women experiences with breastfeeding, it can be very traumatic. And I've read cases where even you know, both mom and baby had to be admitted because, you know, baby was malnourished, and, you know, and it shouldn't have to get to that point. And if you decide not to breastfeed, or you know, decide to stop breastfeeding for whatever reason, the kind of pressure and shame and guilt we put on moms, and it's not fair. So I did some research on what kind of conditions or situations that could actually seriously lower your milk supply. And I didn't read, I read a little bit of everything, and I'm not going to go into detail into every single condition. I'll definitely put the links below of the sources I've used, so if you want to look into it, definitely do that. So one of the issues is PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. A lot of times you could have a very low milk supply, as well as even difficulty getting pregnant in general. Another one is anemia. I know some women have a real problem with anemia even before pregnancy. There are some women who already just have or who are already anemic, and that can definitely hinder your milk supply. Another big one that I've read, and what inspired me to first look into this, another mom had posted it on one of the breastfeeding pages that I follow, and it's called IGT, or Hypoplasia. I'm probably really pronouncing that wrong, or IGT, which is basically insufficient glandular tissue. So it's basically something that happens during puberty, where not enough mammary tissue develops, you know, as you're developing when you're a teenager. So you're basically, you know, missing a lot of tissue, missing a lot of glands, which can really hinder your milk supply. I read that it's rare, so that condition is pretty rare, but that's a serious case of really having little to very little milk supply. Your baby is basically the one who controls your milk flow. So technically, the more often you nurse, the more milk you produce. But in this case, if you have IGT, it doesn't matter. You're going to have a low milk supply because the tissue just isn't there. So, and one of the posts I had read, she had said she was nursing every single hour, and her baby was just miserable and not getting enough nutrients. And she didn't have a choice but to switch to bottle feeding. And then and then also this could, I don't know if it's not necessarily your milk flow, but just could make it difficult to nurse in general, is if you have inverted nipples. Not that it's not possible, you can still find a way to nurse, and I think they sell something that you could put over yourself so that you could like nurse. I don't know if it's like a fake nipple to help the baby be able to latch on. But that's definitely something that can cause actual nursing issues. And then other things that could hinder your supply is stress, your stress levels. If you've ever had a breast reduction, so you're missing a lot of, you know, tissue and nerves and things that you need to be able to produce milk. And as well, if you're a cancer survivor, a lot of times you know, from after effects of chemotherapy or radiation or anything like that could definitely leave, you know, damaged cells and tissue in your breast. Sometimes babies as well will have a symptom or syndrome or something where they're unable to nurse, or they're not able to digest. So one of the things that might be more difficult for babies to be able to physically nurse would be babies who were born premature, babies who are born with a cleft lip or palate, or even babies who are born with Down syndrome. So those are babies that will definitely have difficulty latching on. Those first few weeks are crucial to building your milk up, or creating your milk supply. So if your baby isn't able to physically latch on, then you're not really able to produce. And then if you pump, and then you could pump. But one of the things that I learned from breastfeeding is that you don't get as much milk flow from pumping as you do than physically nursing. And I definitely did see a difference in that. Again, that's something I researched on my own. And then an actual condition could be Galactosemia, which is a baby's inability to break down the galactose in the milk. So they would actually need a special formula that's galactose free. So there really is an array of issues that could arise while nursing, and this is just to name a few. I think I had like 3 pages that I was reading that could really affect milk supply. Some of us experience it, some of us don't. So it is not our place to say, oh, she gave up, or she wasn't trying hard enough, or she chose not to do it, or even if she just simply decided she didn't want to do it. Who cares? You know, if it's not your chi-chis, it's not your problem. Especially since we've had this breastfeeding movement, a lot of formulas have tried stepping it up and coming out with formulas that are really close to breast milk. And there are some that are pretty darn close. So I mean, it's a win-win, you know, and we're lucky, we're fortunate that we have these options. As long as you're not neglecting your child or refusing to actually feed your child, you know, and I'm talking about like forms of abuse. If you're choosing to feed your child, what difference does it make? Do what's best for yourself and for your family, and the rest doesn't matter, okay? So the rest of y'all need to calm your tits, okay? Again, not your chi-chis, not your problem, okay? Anyways, so let me know if you do want me to go ahead and do a video on breastfeeding, whether that's advice or advice on weaning, or maybe someone give me advice because I'm still trying to wean. If you would actually like me to do an actual breastfeeding video, I can do that as well. But I definitely wanted to do this and shed some light on some of the real reasons as to why some women really physically, you know, have a harder time nursing or breastfeeding, or even sometimes have to stop. If you haven't seen our last video, which Tracie did a hair tutorial because she has long, beautiful hair. She did how she does her beach curls. I'll link that video below. And all our social media will be in the description box as well. Be sure to follow us. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit that little notification bell so you can get notified when we upload every single Friday. And that's it. Okay, so we will see you next time. Bye.